Hello and welcome to day 2 of the Greenlight Guru True Quality Virtual Summit, the 3-day event designed to provide actionable takeaways you can implement in your own company to innovate faster, stay ahead of regulatory changes, and use quality as a strategic asset to grow your device business. This session is on IVDR readiness checklist, and my name is Taylor Brown. I'm a med device guru here at Greenlight Guru, and I will be your moderator for today's event. We have a really special session scheduled for you today. I know our speaker, Oliver Eikenberg, is really looking forward to sharing what it will be like to take on and obtain CE marking and maintain EU access under the new IVDR. We're going to try and cover it in 45 minutes, but we probably need around 2 days. Before we dive too deep into today's presentation and introduce our speaker and his company, Emergo by UL, I'm going to touch on a few items really quick. First of all, this session is going to run about 45 minutes in total and will include a Q&A session at the end where Oliver has been kind enough to answer your questions. So I encourage you to submit your questions throughout the presentation as they come up in the box on the right-hand side, and we'll get to as many of them as time permits. Don't worry, the entire session will be recorded. Once the session wraps up, there's a 10-minute break before the next live session begins. If you're interested in learning about understanding post-market surveillance, another huge topic under the EU MDR, being proactive, not reactive, you'll want to ensure that you're registered for the next session and use your unique link to turn in. If you aren't signed up, don't worry, you can register for the next session and over 20 others at virtual-summit.greenlight.guru. I'd also like to share a few words about Greenlight Guru and why we put on this free virtual summit. If you've been on one of our training sessions before, then you know we put these on because improving the quality of life is our mission. Likely a similar mission as many of you at today's summit. Anything we can do as an organization that helps device makers bring safer, life-changing devices to market quicker and with less risk aligns with that mission. We're constantly looking for ways to fulfill that mission, whether that's through hosting free events and training sessions, through partnering with world-class medical device consultancies like Emergo by UL, or through our award-winning medical device QMS software. If you'd like to learn more about why medical device companies from across the globe are moving away from paper-based, general-purpose QMS and adopting our purpose-built medical device quality management software, I encourage you to head over to www.greenlight.guru after today's presentation to schedule your free personalized one-on-one demo. Now, on to the bulk of today's presentation. Let me give a proper introduction to your presenter today, Oliver Eikenberg. Oliver Eikenberg, PhD, is a senior consultant QA/RA at Emergo by UL, a leading regulatory consulting firm specializing in global medical device and IVD compliance. Oliver has over 17 years of medical device regulatory experience combined with technical hands-on experience in device development, manufacturing, and product management. Oliver's analytical chemistry experience combined with many years producing immunoassays informs his expertise in vitro diagnostic devices. Oliver focuses on med device regulations in the EU and the US, including QMS implementations. Oliver's area of expertise include 510K submissions, 513G requests, pre-sub, Q-sub meetings with the FDA, and multiple tech files for CE marking in the EU for medical devices and IVDs. So, without further ado, let me hand it over to your presenter, Oliver Eikenberg.
Thanks for this really kind introduction. And good evening, good morning, everybody. I hope you will see the next 40 minutes left for these and enjoy it to give or to listen to the short overview really for the IVDR readiness check. Maybe we can start with a short background. Actually, it is 22 years ago when we saw these implementation of the current medical device directives. This was called the new approach, and somebody of you might remember these days where we learned about the harmonization of the essential requirement standards and all these industrial manufacturing for medical devices and IVDs. And this was the common legal basis for placing medical devices and IVDs on the European market up to now. So The guiding principles these days were to provide patients, users, third parties with a level of health protection and to attain the performance levels originally attributed to them by the manufacturer. So actually it is the same like we have now for the IVDR. Nothing has changed. However, we will see that there are dramatic changes and which impact everybody of you. So these kind of directives, these were developed over several years also, and somebody of you might remember there were also committees on the standards and technical regulations. In the beginning, it was a technical committee 140, and they also created these accreditation guidelines for the laboratory work. So this just as background information, and finally to move over. So there's nothing so stable as a change, and here we are, ready or not, the compliance to the new legacy device requirements in the EU will need to be demonstrated very soon. If you, I guess everybody of you is aware of the timelines. It started in 2017, and actually over half of the time now has already passed, and so you should have at least a starting point or started to really look at all the additional requirements and your timeline for your kind of devices. So what has happened in the meantime is that we have finally looked at the what has happened under MDD and MDR, and we have seen that the MDR is postponed. This was a shift of 1 year, and it was challenging for the most. And yeah, actually, many of the manufacturers at the moment believe that the pressure now is a little bit off and notified bodies are a little bit relaxing, and it could happen that projects are delayed. And this might also be the impression of the IVDR, but it's not. So we will have the IVDR come into application in May 22. And this date is still very active. There is some discussion about another postponement for the IVDR, but nothing is official, and if even a request has not been put to the European Commission. And considering the timeline of 5 years transition period, it's also maybe not very likely that this will happen, maybe for some kind of devices. So what we are doing today for the next 30 minutes is that to really check, is your company ready for the IVDR or not? And I have reduced the complete requirements, obligations, and changes up to a 10-item IVDR readiness checklist. Of course, it could not be complete. Typically, you have 2 or 3 days or even a week training on this, but it should help you to identify if you have the basic elements and where you are from the perspective of readiness. So we will have poll questions you would see coming up for all these 10 items, and I will explain, give my interpretation, my feedback, where are typical problems out of my experience when I'm doing the technical documentation and all these over the last years with manufacturers. And you can choose between yes, no, or even if you are not sure. So let's check, or let's start with the question number 1. So like auditors, everybody wants to have a plan, and this is typically what notified bodies will ask. Do you have a quality plan for documenting your transition from IVDD to IVDR? Or just to phrase it in a different way, have you performed a gap analysis to identify potential gaps between the IVDD and IVDR? Well, if you look at the standard ISO 13485 and the IVDR, you should have recognized that the new IVDR needs to be considered in line with this quality management standard. And it includes multiple cross-references. For example, the medical device file, the quality objectives address the obligation to meet all applicable regulatory requirements. This could cover REACH or ROSE or CLP. UDI software, so many elements covered already in the quality management standard. And of course, a quality plan needs to be established. So this means that you need an adequate resource planning, budget, training, etc. If you look specifically in the IVDR, you will see under Article 10, the general obligations of the manufacturers. And here it states that the quality management system shall address at least the following aspects. And then you have from A to M, you have a lot of descriptions actually representing or reflecting quality management requirements. So this is the interpretation of, okay, what should be finally in a quality plan? It should include actions. It should include your plan for all these elements. And my question is, from the quality management side, do you have a documented quality plan for this transition? And have you already performed a gap analysis, identified the gaps between the IVDD and the IVDR? So I guess you could see on your right side the questions or the answers, and we might give you maybe 15 seconds to answer and to give me your opinion or your status where you are.
Absolutely. And audience, if you want to go ahead and take a stab at the poll question, Oliver, 43% of our respondents do not have a quality plan in place, and there's a handful who are still not sure. As far as the gap analysis goes, looks like, again, 48%, 49% now have not performed a gap analysis and identified potential gaps between IVD and IVDR.
Okay, so from my perspective, this is the first thing to start, and the first and the most important thing, because you need the support and you need the adequate resource planning, and without a quality plan, you're completely lost, and you will not meet the ISO 13485 requirements, the ISO 13485 requirements. So this is the first thing to start, and yeah, so it's definitely you should start as soon as possible, because it will take some time until all the actions are really listed, and then you have a good starting point. Okay, let's move to, I included here, so plan ahead. I guess this is a general message. Put your plans into action. So this is what you typically should do. One of the questions in your quality plan should be, okay, does your product qualify as an in vitro diagnostic device under the IVDR, or does the IVDR change the classifications of your medical device? So actually to check your category and class. So what does it mean really? Overall, there are no substantial changes in the current definition of an IVD. There are changes in some words, in some interpretations, and also some additional information put in. Of course, we see maybe new definitions for companion diagnostics, near patient testing, everything, yes, but the basic definition is not new, except for one. They have included software. So here you see that the software now is in the IVD definition. Generally, what you should do is, or how would you find out about your category or classification? Well, you can use current interpretations, and what you should do is then assess well in advance the IVDR application of the application May 2020, whether your product may fall under the IVDR scope or not. If you are unsure, you should try to contact notified bodies or even consultants before you're entering the market. So how could it work? We see a lot of examples of classification guidelines, and you might be aware of all these. We have these MEDEF guidelines. Here are listed the 2.14, 1 and 2 for the research product for a lot of these borderline products. And we have also from the MHRA, these borderline manual. In addition, there is already some internal documents. So this is not official, but we have it as an internal document. So we could anticipate where the European Commission recommendations will be in the future. And this will be when it is, if it is, or when it is final, it will be published from this NDCG group. So this is an internal discussion paper for the guidance on classification rules. And just to give you example or feedback, I guess they have about 140 different requests for classification questions. So this could be really tricky. And to give you also one example, why I mentioned software. So this is a table actually made for the difference between the MDD and MDR. However, some of these devices, like the software suggesting diagnosis based on test results, might be software for IVD. And the MDCG working group has also published in October 2019 already a guidance on qualification and classification of software in light of the MDR and IVDR. So what could happen theoretically, and this has happened already several times, is that the IVDR, because it includes now the software, and because the interpretation was before not adequately done, that manufacturers now need to move from the MDD to the IVDD and maybe directly to the IVDR. Or in other words, they might classify it as an accessory to their corresponding IVD and fall under the IVDR. And for these kind of scenarios, it would be really helpful to consider or to adequately reflect the medical MEDEF guidelines and also the new interpretation, like here from the MDCG group. The same could be maybe for specimen receptacles or for other borderline products where there is still a little bit different interpretations and different view on these kind of devices if they would fall under MDD or IVDD, or then new under MDR and IVDR. So this is for the category, actually, if it is a medical device or in vitro diagnostic device. The second element is the classification. And here we have for the first time the Article 47 and the classification of devices. And I guess everybody knows we move away from this positive listing now under the IVDD, list A, B, self-testing and general devices. And we have now this system which is based on the GHDF, use these 7 classification routes. Here they are, and we will have a lot of discussions for maybe also these kind of Rule 7. There are a lot of sub-items and definitions given here, what could be considered or to fall under this rule. We have also a Rule 6, which is just for devices not covered by Rule 1 to 5, so something like a backfall rule. Also, this will be definitely something where we will have discussions on what could be devices under this rule. So overall, we will have a lot of elements where it is absolutely clear, or devices where it is clear, but we will also have a lot of discussions. And as long as there is no official interpretation, nobody really knows what it could fall in there, and what you need would be a classification document. My second question is, does the IVDR may change the categorization of your product as a medical device or IVD? So as I has explained for software, for example. And I would encourage you also to give me your feedback if this is something where you need further support or where you are unsure.
Mm-hmm. So Oliver, a lot of people affected by the categorization change. About a third of the respondents said that their category does change from med device to IVD. Another third are not sure. Mm-hmm. As far as the classification, pretty in sync with that alignment as well. So we have about a third of people who do not have a classification change, another third who do, and another third who are not sure. So we are all over the place here.
Okay. So actually, my second question, does the IVDR change classification of your products, was a little bit like a trick question or a catch question, because actually for everybody should have included here yes, because you move away from the old classification and have a complete new classification scheme. So therefore you at least should.
Very tricky. Something to be aware of, though, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, but good to know. So let's move on to the first question, which is a complete different section. It's about economic operators, and the question is, have you updated your quality agreements or even agreements to cover the new requirements for economic operators, distributors, importers, but also European representative, if this would apply? It could also include service providers, but I need to mention that these are not considered economic operators. And I also want to just state here change that it is also a change from these OEM PLM business. So what I actually have summarized here is that the role or the requirements for economic operators in the supply chain has dramatically changed. You see this in the articles 10, 11, 13, 14, and also 30, and it describes the obligations that must be carried out by all involved parties. So for the economic operators, so the importers, the distributors, and the European representative, this would be or needs to be in agreements. And definitely these would be new. But I also wanted to state that even if it is not an economic operator, but the IVDR has a specific section that it is now required under the IVDR and just written down, also written down in Article 10, that the manufacturer is required to hold a full copy of the technical documentation at all times. And I know from my experience that in the IVD world, there is a lot of these called OEM, PLM, or OBL business. And although it has been discussed since many years, it is still used. And under the IVDR, it will not be possible. So you need to have the full copy. And for me, what I have, my understanding, it's the end of the OEM PLM. I have to admit that even beginning of these years, I have done an audit and also a notified body accepted still this under the MDD, but this will not be, as of today, we will not have this scenario for the IVDR, and this has a dramatic change then, because you need really the full technical documentation, and this means that you have maybe design control, manufacturing data, and everything must be provided to the manufacturer. I just wanted to let you know maybe two elements that this might be this kind of documentation, like for the manufacturing information, must be also included in the technical documentation. Maybe it states that more detailed information shall be provided for the audit of the quality management system. So it comes back to the initial statements I gave for the 13485, that for economic operators and outsourced processes like a contract manufacturer or even specification developer, you should have evidence about 13485 or how 13485 elements are maintained. You can have this in an audit, you can have this whatever simply through the certificates, but you need to demonstrate this to notified bodies. And this is an original the text from the expectation from a notified body I got yesterday, and they state in their checklist that all significant subcontractors, crucial suppliers must be added to associated QMS certificates and the announced audit visit schedule. Significant subcontractors and crucial suppliers that do not hold a valid 345 certificate may require a subcontractor audit depending on the scope of their activities. So the level of information provided to the notified body and the control will definitely increase. And my question here is actually not for the OEM PLM. My question here is just for the agreements, what you would have for the really economic operators, so distributor, importer, and European representative.
All right, so that poll is live. Please take a second to submit your response. Results are coming in, and the overwhelming majority of people say no, we have not updated our quality agreements. And Oliver, after reading that statement you just shared on the screen about the unannounced audits and requiring subcontractor audits, that's a big commitment and a big change to make.
Yeah. So I can really tell you that I had recently a project where the quality responsible person needed to make or go through 600 distributors, importers, and actually for none of these contracts were there. For none of these, they were not qualified. Actually, it's a violation against every supplier control, and so based on what I saw and what I also saw from notified bodies is that they will have very strict audit procedures, and it might directly then be the end of these parties then to provide these services. So actually you must be aware that these are part of your supply chain, and specifically distributors and importers must be qualified and must meet the obligations from these articles. And this reflects 3485 elements in my view. So it's quite easy to implement this. We have also as a solution, I have another client where we provided training for distributors and importers. So it's not hard work. It is just that you plan for it, that you adequately train them, that you have an adequate agreement, and that you are able to follow up on this, and then you can simply solve this. Okay, let's move to number 5, harmonized standards. It's always a question, do you comply with the current state-of-the-art standards? Do you updated testing of your device? So what is state-of-the-art is the question. And if you look at the official journal of the European Union, then you see that from the starting point, we have seen more, in 1998, we have seen more and more standards published from the Commission. And it was typically, until the end of 2017, it was a regular change, and it was nearly always up to date with these standards published also from certification organizations or from groups like the ISO or EN or whatever versions. But this has stopped in 2018, and so what has happened now is that the European Commission has a so-called implementing decision on the 24th of March, and this is then listing the harmonized standards for in vitro diagnostic medical devices drafted in support of the IVD directive. So actually they make clear that what typically they expect at least for the IVD directive. Well, we are now talking about the IVDR. So, and that's the reason why in this standard or in this official decision, many standards, many updated standards are not included. So what you typically should do and what to prepare adequately for an IVDR is that you need to assess if there are new standards, new standard versions, and how to show compliance to the essential requirements or general safety requirements for the IVDR, maybe also for risk management, for clinical performance. So in other words, we have since 2017 many standards, and not all are listed under this official journal now. But these are needed sometimes, depending on the device, as to comply with the GSPR in the future. And as a general requirement, you need to consistently meet current state-of-the-art standards. So it might even pose a risk to your device. Okay. What does it mean as a background? So the medical device coordination groups at the moment, or since 2017, or since they have started later than, they have a list of around 240 standards. And step by step, they will revise these and update these. One of the recent examples is for the ISO 14971, the third edition in 2019. Another one is the ISO 29116 standard for the clinical performance. So, and these standards, specifically these two, are elementary for planning of IVDD, clinical performance under the IVDR, in my view. You cannot, or you will not meet these if you not follow these standards. And there might be new standards. And as I said, these are not published. So you should have a structure, and you should be able to comply with the recent applicable standards for your device. And therefore, my question number 5 is: do you comply with the current standards, or do you even need testing of your device to the current standards?
All right, team, you know the drill. Go ahead and submit your answer here about complying with current state-of-the-art standards. We have some preliminary results, and about half of the group here is saying yes, they do comply with current state. But another third is saying that they do not know or are unsure. So,
okay, so even for the 50%, this is good information, and keep on identifying whatever comes up, and because this finally is the safety of your device. Okay, let's move to number 6, because I guess we're running out of time and we need to a little bit speed up. So the next one is the scientific, analytical, and clinical performance data. And this directly continues what I have said. So we have these definitions, and I guess everybody knows these kind of definitions for scientific validity, analytical performance, and clinical performance. And if you know maybe that these kind of standards specifically for the external performance evaluation testing, which has been since 2002, these EN 13612, you might have already recognized that this has been now updated, and this is a new standard for these 29116 2019. And this standard is really great. It includes a lot of requirements for clinical performance testing, a lot of requirements from the ISO 14155. So for informed consent, for maybe even links to general data protection. So a lot of elements to consider for clinical performance evaluation testing. And finally, it reflects also what was before published by the GHDF guidance documents. Definitely, you will have a major change from your clinical data. So you will have a lot of clinical data will be increased. Clinical evidence must be justified. You must be continuously keep it up to date. You must follow a performance evaluation plan, a performance evaluation report, a summary of safety performance. And if you have gone through the IVDR, then you have identified all these, and it might be applicable if you have done the classification adequately, then you know what exactly you finally would need to include. So the question for the readiness check is, do you have already a performance evaluation plan addressing the scientific validity, analytical, and clinical performance evaluation? Or do you have clinical investigations and may have considered, and have you considered the new standards like the risk management and the 29116?
Oliver, it looks like we are at 46% of people do not have a performance evaluation plan.
Okay.
35% coming in with yes.
Okay. So even for the no's, if you don't have a performance evaluation plan, you will not meet the criteria. So the plan always is a starting point for demonstrating to notified bodies what you intend to do. So without the plan, you will be lost, and maybe 60–80% of the work has to be done on the plan. So the testing finally might be much easier if you have really a good plan with statistics, with rationales included. Okay, number 7, check your status for post-marketing and PMPF. So do you have a post-market surveillance plan also reflecting IVDR Annex, and specifically establishing a proactive and systematic process to collect any post-marketing information? And do you have a post-market performance follow-up plan in place reflecting the IVDR Annex 18? 30, sorry. So just as a short overview, you see in the articles that you have these PMS plan, PMS report, also here. It's a post-market performance follow-up plan. It's a periodic safety update report, but a lot of these are relating to a planning. And planning always means a signed plan, resource planning, budget planning. You have a structure, maybe a quality system procedure, what tells you how you do this finally. And the question is, do we have this plan for post-marketing and for PMPF?
And I know there's a couple layers to this question, but we have 37% of people saying yes, they do have these plans, 41% saying no.
Yeah. Okay, so this is also a very critical element because the post-market performance follow-up plan, at least, would demonstrate and support maybe gaps in your current clinical performance data. So this is just something what you should consider, and that this might be very helpful for notified bodies to convince them what you actually are doing. You might not have directly started with clinical performance testing because this could be really tricky, specifically under the current scenario with COVID-19, but at least you should have a post-market performance follow-up plan. So give something to the notified bodies that they have something to put in their report and to justify that you do your job and adequately and have safety, provide safety for the device. So number 8 is for the technical documentation structure. And yeah, have you updated your technical documentation structure? Have you updated your central requirement checklist to the GSUPR requirements? And do you have a dedicated, qualified, responsible person? So I have summarized this as all elements to be of structural nature. So it might be simply maybe elements to change in your quality procedure. And I directly moved to I just wanted to mention one element, that all documents, it's written in the IVDR, all documents of CTD must be well structured and organized and clearly identifiable for reviewers. Decisions must be justified, e.g. by a risk-based approach. So I'm moving back to the question. So have you updated your technical documentation structure, ER checklist, and a qualified person for these structural changes?
Oliver, it looks like about 40% of people have updated it. 49% have not updated these documents.
Okay. We are always around 50% with that. Okay,
I'm sensing a theme here.
There's another formal element for what you need to consider. This is for UDAMED, and also will also be just provide one slide for this. Are you and your economic operators prepared for UDI and data entry into UDAMED? So this is a basic question, and this might be also part of the agreement you have with the economic operators. So I would show you what it means. So you have this is a UDAMED structure published by the European Commission, how it should look like. It might change, but these are elements like the registration, UDI, here are the certificates, and you see here on this side the clinical investigations. And everybody, or the responsible parties like the manufacturer, importer, or notified bodies, or competent authorities will put in the data, and we will see this. So at least you should have a procedure, and you should be prepared for UDI, because there's a lot of publication already and guidance published that you are prepared for these data entry into UDAMED. Maybe not complete, but prepared. And this is my nearly final question.
I know a lot of mysteries surrounding UDAMED right now, so I'm not particularly surprised with the results. 49% of people say no, and the other 20% say not sure. Only 30 are ready to go for UDAMED. Okay,
then 30% of you have done a really great job already. And for the others, please start now, start to address this. And this is really helpful also for UDI, for your labeling. So it might take longer than you expect. The last thing, notified bodies, and this is an element of most discussion, I guess. Have you confirmed that your notified body will be designated to the IVDR, or will you need to change your notified body? So if you look at the current situations, you see that we have the supervision, we have unannounced audits, we have surveillance assessments, and we have a significant number of notified bodies which might be not re-notified or maybe not notified for the same scope, which as a consequence could force some or many of you to change or even for the first time to contact with a notified body. What you need is then, you need to be aware of that they expect early interaction with the notified body. You can ask for timelines. You need to be prepared to deliver documents up front. And this is just a short overview of the current situation. We have currently officially three notified bodies under the IVDR, and there's a lot of pending where we don't know if they will be then under the IVDR. I have not included all the complete scopes, but you can check this on the Nando page, and this is on a regular basis. This is updated. So this kind of information was also, I guess, for March. So I believe, based on the COVID-19 scenarios, they have not updated these kind of information over the last weeks. So it might be that there is one or two other notified bodies already officially then accredited. And my last question is, have you confirmed that your notified body will be designated, or will you need to change?
Really good news here. We have almost 60% of people saying yes, they have confirmed that their notified body will be designated to IVDR.
That's great, because this is really important. And this gives me also some kind of a final conclusion. So we have seen over the last 30 minutes, nearly up to 40 minutes, sorry, that a lot of elements are still not addressed. However, you have made really a good job with maybe interaction, with preparing for everything. You just really need to keep on and bring all into documents, and maybe bring clarification into documents. It might be limitations for resources. So actually, please avoid the IVDR deadline becoming a flatline for your device. We can support you in these route to market. You might be aware of our information. So we have these processes, we have white papers where you can get a lot of information. We have also the IVDR readiness checklist, which you can download. It's a little bit longer, but it includes also these elements. And we have a lot of expertise. So whenever there are questions, please feel free. And I'm here also for some questions for the next 5 minutes. How long do we have?
We have about 7 minutes left. We're going to go a little bit over, but I think we'll give a nice break before our next presentation. Oliver, we want to go back to the statement about the qualification of economic operators. Does this require a site audit, or can this be completed via review of certifications along with a more traditional quality agreement and supplier questionnaire?
That's really an excellent question. I'm not aware that there is a specific statement or requirement, but anyway, you need to show evidence that these elements are in place. So typically, I would, like for every supplier, if you have everything listed in an agreement, in an economic operator agreement, it would not necessarily, in my view, need an on-site audit. If you would maybe have the evidence or maybe a 13485 certificate, then it would demonstrate compliance to these standards.
Absolutely. Similar vein, does the OEM PLM principle only under MDD, or does it also apply for IVDD?
Yeah, it applies for both. And under MDR and IVDR, both are not, in my view. There was a lot of discussion about this, but I cannot see how this could be done. And I know that notified bodies are actually forced to not accept this anymore. And this was already stated in many countries also since 2013. So you must really know that these OEM PLM is something like a business scenario, but it has never been included in the IVDD, in the MDD, or nor it is in the IVDR or MDR. So there's no legal basis for this. Of course, I know that it has been accepted over a long time, but at the moment this has changed since 2013.
Good. Yeah, good clarification there. I have two questions that are more related to specific product use cases. So we have one question about a blood cell count analyzer with various reagents like a blood diluent, blood counter, rinser. What quality specifications would this participant need to consider here?
Is it really relating to the quality management? So this would require 1345 certificate. Or is it a question related to technical elements?
I'm assuming technical elements.
Okay, so there is a long list of standards which typically could apply out of the list of harmonized standards, and the manufacturer is responsible for identifying them. But typically, just to give you a feedback on this, so typically we or maybe also the testing laboratory can support you in finding the right harmonized standards. Harmonized standards are still voluntary, so you might, for each of these standards, also comply with the requirements of the standard in a different way. So it is just maybe the easiest way how to comply with a specific standard the European Commission has published, or the working groups.
Absolutely. And could you provide a little insight on software as a medical device? So a lot of our participants here are working with software, mobile applications, particularly with the distribution requirements. So what if the medical device app is provided for free to a customer? If you are a distributor, how should the verification check look like, and how should it be documented?
I'm not aware of that there is a difference if you provide something for free or for a specific course. So the economic value does not impact the regulatory status. So whatever you provide for your device and what would be used in a combination should be safe and should be included in your IVD. If it is maybe an accessory, or if it is a component of a kit or whatever, and the specific scenario, how it is distributed and how it is maybe then placed on the market, might then decide if it is maybe in a component, accessory, or a standalone device, and how it will then be classified. This is typically what should be done in the first stage. And of course, for the marketing, there are also different ways of maybe e-marketing, also without an instruction. And this is laid down maybe, for example, in the specific standards like the 18113 standards for information supplied to the manufacturer, or other standards.
Yeah, we could probably do a whole nother virtual summit just on questions like that. Oliver, one last question for you. In regards to Eutamed, from the economic operator's perspective, what types of data need to be entered into Eutamed? Is Eutamed something only manufacturers have to enter data into?
No. Also distributors, also notified bodies, and you will also see, or we at the moment see, that there is some information, of course, from each European country. We have at the moment the national maybe registration databases or the authorities, and they will all need to change their structure and will also link their information and put it into Eutamed. So it will be, I have shown on the slide that there is several elements, but these elements are not final, and at the moment we can only estimate. There's I guess a draft version published, but it's not free for everybody, and we don't know the level of information what should be in and what is also then public information. So it might be different levels for, of course, for authorities, for manufacturers, and but to my information, this is not yet final. If you prepare for the UDAMED, so that you include everything, maybe your UDI, you have it on your label, you have it on your declaration of conformity, then up to date, you are up to date and you are well prepared. And I would then recommend to wait until the final UDAMED are official and officially published. But it might be some of the medical device coordination group documents, might be some more information in already.
Absolutely. We will await more information as it is released. Oliver, thank you so much for your time today and a great discussion. These great questions that we can go through as companies and make sure we are ready for IVDR. All right, everyone, thank you so much for your attendance today. We'll see you at the next session and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.